Welcome all. It is the NFL Week 14 Millie Roundtable. So if you're wondering, we only have a month left of regular season NFL football. So we have to count our days. We had a fun week last week. We get a fun week this week with several great matchups, not just on the regular Sunday slate, but we have a lot of primetime affairs. We get Cowboys and Eagles Sunday night as well. We have every sport covered as well, too. We have the in-season tournament for NBA. As a big Pacers fan, I'm excited to see if they'll hold up against LeBron and Anthony Davis. But as always, I am joined by Snyder and Drew, Red Kachik. Should be a good time, Snyder. How'd you do last week, and how are you feeling this week?
It was actually a pretty decent week last week with nothing huge, but a slightly profitable week. So looking forward to diving into this one. I think we got some fun games to target this week, and we've got a couple of games with some pretty brutal weather, it looks like, as well.
Yeah, it really does. The Northeast is kind of looking a little bit murky again, like we hinted at last week. And Drew, you celebrated a birthday last week, not yours, but you were celebrating some birthdays last week and stuff. Man, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good. My daughter turned 4, so we go to Disney for her birthday, do the whole Disney Christmas thing. So sorry I couldn't be with y'all, but I had a good birthday weekend, and a lot of good contests as we go into the end of the season. The FanDuel Millie is tomorrow, the $250 FanDuel Fan Millie, whatever it's called. But looking forward to breaking this slate down. But a lot of good slates as we wrapped up college football, and football NFL will be the focus, obviously.
Yes, should be a good one. And like I said, we have 11 games to get into. We have full content up on site. We got cores, player pools, and much more. Giblets 44% off your first payment, whether it's a week or a month. Giblets 44. So let's go ahead and dive in. If you guys want to follow along, SaberSim is what I use. And we're going to be starting off with a local game for me. It's the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Indianapolis Colts, one of the closest proximities to two teams, just 2 hours away from each other. We get the Colts taking on a Bengals team that surprised everyone last week. And Jake Browning looked like a stud. Jamar Chase didn't have any issue getting the ball from him. And we also saw Zach Moss, fresh off being super chalk last week. He's going to be super chalk again. Snyder, this looks like a pretty popular game from a tournament perspective. I think we've been targeting against the Colts a little bit here, and even the Bengals in the running game and tight end position. We have 5 players projected for double-digit ownership, 2 of those being Browning and Chase. And Joe Mixon is even cracking 20% too. What are you doing with this one? Which side do you have more interest in?
Yeah, I think Browning's going to be one of the more popular, probably like a top 3 quarterback this week. I think he's a good play here. 5,200 on DraftKings, great price. He actually looks comfortable. I thought he looked good when he first came in for Burrow, and then last week, he looked good last week. I mean, he almost put up 30 DK points, and that's more than a lot of quarterbacks have put up this year. 354 through the air. You'd like to target this a cold secondary. I think Jamar Chase with the price tag of 7.6. I think that's going to be kind of held in check with the other studs on the slate that are going to take up a lot of ownership. So I do like some Browning to Chase here stacks there. I think Higgins is fine too. If you want to go in there, like nobody's going to play Higgins. He's cheap on FanDuel as well. I was looking at him in one of my teams over there in one of those fan championship teams over there. I think both of those guys are fine. I mean, I'll definitely probably be slightly overweight on Browning. He probably will make one of my 3 main teams for the 3 max as well, I think. So I like the Browning Chase combo there. And then you look at the Colts side of the ball there. I played Moss in cash and I played him in single entry stuff, but I wasn't too heavily overweight on him in tournaments. But I think I may actually lock him this week because I really like the matchup for him this week. Some people got burnt a little bit. I think he'll still probably be 40% plus. So I think he'll be definitely a cash lock again. So I'm just going to kind of roll with him pretty much on every team, I think, this week. Pittman's a fine option, kind of priced up there, though. I'd rather just pay the extra $300 for Chase, so personally. And then Josh Downs is another guy. It should be probably under 10%. I think he's a good guy to go to there. Kind of busted last week, too, which hopefully will keep some people off of him. Hasn't really done much the last 4 weeks, but we've seen the ceiling that he brings there. About 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, he had some good games. So I think I'm going to sprinkle some Downs in as the run back if I run the Browning Chase stack. I'd run it back with Downs and then Moss as well to kind of stack it up a little bit. But I think this is a good way to target this opening game here. The total isn't great, but it's 44, which is better than a lot of the totals on the slate.
Yeah, a lot of low totals across the board. And yeah, what you mentioned, as weird as it is to say, if you would have said 7 days ago that you would have a lot of Jake Browning coming into the week after the Jags game, you would have been like, no way. But how times change, and the weather tomorrow in Cincinnati will be cloudy. It won't be too breezy or anything like that. It'll be a good game for football in the fall. What's funny, though, is 5.2K, and it hits this spot, Drew, where you kind of like a team with a low 20s, almost mid-20s team total, where they're cheap to stack up, and Browning is only 5,200. I know some cheap quarterbacks kind of fit your ideal lineup sometimes. Goodness. And I think that might be the case this week if I had to guess.
Yeah, it is. That's what I was going to point out, was the value on Browning makes a lot of sense when you consider who you can stack him with and the ceiling that Jamar Chase has. And obviously Higgins is an option, or you can also do a three-way with Mixon. So yeah, Browning obviously at 5,200 is probably the best value on the board, especially considering you can stack him. Obviously, values don't mean very much from a QB perspective if there's no component of stacking. So yeah, I think Mixon's a good target. I think, again, if Browning does get behind the ball, get behind in the game, Mixon is a good target for them to kind of get the ball moving. We saw him get a little bit more action last week, which he didn't get for majority of the season, to be honest. So I think I'm mostly interested with the Pittman side. If I'm going to run it back, I think Moss is going to be pretty popular. 5,900 for me, I don't think I buy into the ownership. I think there's some other spots I want to go for running back. And so, yeah, like I said, I think Cincinnati from a cheap stack makes a lot of sense. And then the run back Pittman, I mean, he still has a ceiling as good as anyone, even with Minshew behind the center.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one here. With Colts, Zach Moss going to be one of the best plays. Like, Cincinnati cannot defend the running back position. ETN was he wasn't 100%, it felt like, last game. He still got into the end zone, could have scored twice. They sneaked it with Lawrence, would have, could have, should have, whatever. But ETN still did fine. And I think the Colts being able to run the ball, I mean, the fact that Moss is under 6K for a guy who's going to get a load of work against a team that struggled against the running back spot, it's one of those, don't overthink it. And when Joe Mixon's projecting for over 20%, despite losing carries to Chase Brown last week, and it wasn't just losing carries. It was Chase Brown got worked in the first half quite a bit. Mixon ran good on touchdowns, but if you're, I know we played Joe Mixon for the touchdowns. I'm not naive or anything, but when you start to see an aging running back kind of lose a little bit of his grip on the roll, why would you want to play that? And over 20% seems a bit high. Other than that, I think you guys have just absolutely nailed this game. We don't really need to spend too much more time on it. It is definitely one to kind of watch. Going from another Ohio game to the next one, it's in Cleveland. This one could be a little bit sloppier, and you also have the big caveat that Trevor Lawrence probably won't play. That's my guess, right? I think it's going to be C.J. Beathard. He'll be the quarterback for the Jaguars, if I had to guess. Obviously, that offense takes a massive hit, and that doesn't even account for the fact that they're playing against Cleveland, one of the better defenses in the league, hit or miss sometimes, but they've been really good at home. And then you look over on the Cleveland side of the ball, there is only one play in this game projecting over 5%. That is the Browns defense at 3K. They are projecting for the most chalk defense on the entire slate. Snyder, do you have a different read on this game at all? Maybe you have interest in a guy like Jerome Ford with Kareem Hunt potentially. No, Kareem Hunt is in, sorry.
Yeah, I think you could look at a few things here. Definitely the Browns defense is going to be the chalk option here. I think it's going to be a rough day for old Mr. Beathard this week, but I do like one play off the Jacksonville side. I do like Parker Washington quite a bit at 3K. If you're looking to jam in CMC and some of those other studs, Parker Washington was a stud at Penn State. Should have been drafted higher, but had an injury late in the season there, which really hampered his draft stock there. He came in and played 41 of 69 snaps last week after Kirk went down. He caught all 6 of his targets for 61 yards and a touchdown. I think Parker Washington and the Jags are going to be forced to throw often and early and often in this game, as I expect the Browns to be up in this game. So I like Parker Washington quite a bit at 3K min to help jam in the studs for me. So I'm going to want to roster a lot of studs this week. Then looking at the Cleveland side, I'm definitely going to be right there with the Browns defense. I think that's just too good of a play at 3K flat. So I'll probably be slightly overweight on the field. I mean, they're a cash lock pretty much if you can get there in cash games, but nothing really jumping out to me too much. I mean, Elijah Moore at 4,500. I mean, if they somehow get into a back and forth game and not up big in this game, Flacco is definitely not afraid to throw the ball, and he targeted Moore quite a bit. But it looks like Cooper's going to be back in this game, which could hamper him a little bit as Cooper went out halfway through that game, I believe, last week. David Njoku is always a solid option at a bad tight end position. 4.1K is a fine tag for him, but no real conviction on the Browns here. I do think the Browns win this game comfortably, and I would go with the Browns defense, but I do like Parker Washington a good bit there at 3K on the Jag side.
Yeah, Parker Washington was the one who stepped up after Christian Kirk went out after the first offensive play of the game for the Jaguars there after a 26-yard catch. And it wasn't Calvin Ridley who stepped up. It wasn't Zay Jones. No, it was Parker Washington. Obviously not the ideal spot, Drew. I think you're probably going to be the same way in terms of just Browns defense, right? But tell me a little bit more about the Jerome Ford. He's been a guy who's weirdly popped in some milli maker winners, despite never really scoring like a lead or anything. All of a sudden you look at the lineup and be like, Jerome Ford had 13 fantasy points and he was in the winning milli lineup. I hope that maybe the case will be this week, but what's your thoughts on that after a Jacksonville team that just conceded bunches to the Bengals running backs last week?
Yeah, but I think those game environments where they were able to at least move up the field and get into the red zone and they could just kind of push it in. I'm not sure this is going to be that one of those games. It's probably the lowest total on the slate. It just seems like it's going to be a very slow punt fest. So I don't think this is the game environment where Jerome Ford at 5,500 can pay it off. And he's not going to be over-owned where you're going to feel like you're hurting yourself by fading him. So I think it's an easy fade just from I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't think running backs in low total games do very well in general. So I don't think I'm going out on a limb there. But yeah, no Jerome Ford for me. I think it's honestly just a defense game. The Browns at 3K make a lot of sense, and they're going to be one of the more popular defenses, obviously. But honestly, the $3,600, I think, for the Jaguars defense, this game could completely go the opposite way. Like both teams are low scoring, and the Jaguars just kind of hold off a lead against Flacco and the Browns. I could see the Jaguars defense being a nice contrarian play, which will be probably a third of the ownership of Cleveland. So, but yeah, for most of the way, I am going to be defensive on this team or on this game. I'm not going to play much offensive people, man. I looked at Ridley, been playing a bit of him at 6,400. It just doesn't make sense. You need a ceiling game, and a team total of 18 points is not going to get there. Njoku, maybe Njoku is cheap enough at 4,100, but I think there's other spots. So for me, Cleveland Browns number one, and probably Jaguars defense as a leverage spot.
Awesome. And I wonder if anyone else having issues with the stream. I apologize if you are having issues with the stream. We'll go ahead and ask for others here too. So I'll ask for some help. Maybe we can find a solution. So apologies if you are having issues with the YouTube stream. It could be a problem on YouTube. It's not through the RPS site or anything like that. So hopefully we can figure that out shortly. But again, sorry for the troubles there. Moving on from the Cleveland side of the ball, we'll go to Detroit and Chicago. This is a game that just faced off, 3 weeks ago. We saw Justin Fields do really well. We saw the Bears absolutely collapse late. And ultimately, the Lions ended up taking that game after Eberflus's fourth down decisions were very curious, to say the least. You get Justin Fields here at 6,800. There's not much projected ownership in this game, probably because it's in Chicago. It's outdoors. The weather isn't fantastic by any means. DJ Moore is the only guy who profiles above 10% here, according to SaberSim's ownership Snyder. You got Cole Kmet a close second at 9%, and then Justin Fields. Doesn't look like there's any interest on the Lions. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the Bears are going to win this game personally. So I'm going to be pretty heavy on the Bears plus the 3.5. I got that a couple days ago, and I'm going to be on Justin Fields and such here. I think Fields is going to be one of those top three highest owned quarterbacks on the slate, and rightfully so. I'll be looking to play Fields. I'll even double Fields. I think you can play K-Met and DJ Moore. I know DJ Moore is going to be pretty popular, but I don't think many people are going to double him, though. I think a lot of people either play Fields naked or Fields with Moore or Fields with Kmet, but I'm going to go for the double here. I think the Bears are I think they're going to win this game outright, like I said, and the the Lions, like if you look at the numbers, they have a good offensive line versus defensive line rating, but I think that's kind of a little noisy as Montez Sweat has actually made this Bears defense pretty good lately. They've scored double-digit points, the Bears have on defense 4 of the last 7 games. So I'm going to have some interest in the Bears defense even at 2.4K, and I don't think anybody's really going to go there for that. I'm seeing there. I think they're going to be under 5% for sure. So I really like the savings of the Bears defense there. Get Goff outdoors in bad weather, not really bad weather, but it's going to be cold though. And Goff generally doesn't do that well outdoors in the cold weather. So I love fading Goff in those situations. So I'm mainly going to be on the Bears here. You could go to either one of the Lions running backs, I think, though, depending if they don't get game scripted apart, but they're going to be both under 5% owned. Maybe this is a spot where Gibbs catches some dump offs if they do get behind here. 6.6K. He's going to be like 2 to 3% owned, I bet, on this slate. So if you want a run back, I think I would go probably with like a Gibbs or something. I'm not going to pay the 8.2K for St. Brown. I think that's too high priced. But I do like the Bears quite a bit here. The doubles with Fields, Kmet, and DJ Moore is what I'm mainly looking at. And then I'm going to play some Bears defense as well.
Yeah, it's nice. Obviously, the Lions, Jared Goff especially, having some major issues turning the ball over in recent weeks. If he doesn't solve that, I mean, this is apparently going to be a really windy game. It could have some, not really windy, I guess. I can't use the really part there, but it's going to be a windy game. Drew, what does that do for you? I mean, is this a game that you're mostly just kind of grossed out on?
Not completely. I do lean kind of the Chicago side. I think Chicago has a leg up a little bit in that regard. Fields, so the temperature, it's going to be 30 degrees. It's going to be pretty cold. Winds are going to be around 15 miles per hour, gusting over 20. So like long passes are probably going to be difficult. So like that takes me off of a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Sam Laporta goes up my list. So I think from a tight end perspective, I do like Sam Laporta. I think if you're going to get passes off, if it's going to be windy and cold, tight ends are always good targets, and he should be pretty low owned because his projection is pretty low. So I do like Laporte in this spot, but I'm kind of with Snyder. I think the Chicago side is an interesting spot. I probably would only stack up one guy. I'm not sure if this game really goes deep, so I like Fields with DJ Moore or Fields with Kmet, and that's probably it. So I'm fairly shallow. Defenses, I don't hate it if you want to play defense here. This game could easily just be a slugfest, or a slog, I should say, not a slugfest, slog. So, yeah, I lean the Chicago side, and then from Detroit, it's really Laporta, and it's just a game environment. I think Laporta gets the dump offs. Gibbs, you mentioned Gibbs. I think that's fine too, but it's just a one-off from Detroit and maybe a two-man stack from Chicago.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, 6,600, definitely has some just big play potential, and if they go down, you saw it last time too. He can get a lot of catches in that pass game, kind of one of those passing scripts. And when I look at the running back position as a whole, you know, it's not the most like exciting thing in the entire world. Like it kind of goes back to last week where if you want to take a risk, like last week it was Derrick Henry, where if you had Derrick Henry, you got 2 touchdowns, that ended up being the ticket for you. I think you can afford to get different at the running back position in the mid 6K range, and Gibbs could fit that bill. Obviously, the Bears have some issues stopping the run at times. They've been a little bit more of a pass funnel, though, in the past few weeks. I guess funnel's not the correct word either. But, yeah, you guys nailed this game. We'll go to a dome game now. Carolina and New Orleans. So, clearly no weather issues in New Orleans as they play in the Superdome. But this is one where we have a little bit of injury news to watch. We have Taysom Hill questionable. You had Derek Carr questionable. But Carr looks like to be a go. Taysom news is yet to be determined. 3 guys have double-digit ownership in this game is what it's projecting. It's Mingo, Olave, and Kamara. Kamara is one of the more chalky running back options tomorrow, Snyder. And you mentioned this where he has a little bit of a hindrance with Taysom Hill stealing some goal line carries. Kamara did really well last week. You know, Taysom Hill did not get the second goal line touchdown that I thought he was going to get when they were down there in that range. But you also, in the same game, we get Mingo at cheap again. I mean, 3,500, and he looked really decent last week. And I'm not saying like, you know, he's a must play or whatever, but for a value goes at 3,500, you can do much worse than Mingo, right, Snyder?
Yeah, for sure. I played Mingo a lot last week as my punt to kind of fit in the studs, and I expect to kind of do the same thing this week. 3.5K. I think he's basically transcended into the wide receiver 1 there, I think. with just looking at the targets he's been getting. 10 targets last week. His snaps and targets have went up the last 3 weeks. So definitely like some Mingo again this week at 3.5K. He'll be one of the more overweight guys I get on for the value wide receivers this week. And then I don't think I'm going to get to Olave this week at 7K flat, but I do like a Kamara quite a bit, especially if Taysom's out. We've seen across the industry and at Sabres bumped his ownership up. They bumped the projection up today too. So I think we're going to see a very chalky Alvin Kamara come Sunday. And it's actually going to pull down some of the ownership from guys like CMC too, I think. So definitely like the 8.2K price tag on Kamara. He's a guy that we should see him catch, 6 or 7 balls like we've been seeing. I mean, last week he got 6 or 58, had another 51 on the ground and 2 touchdowns. I think that's another likely deal that we see Kamara put up 25 to 30 fantasy points in this game with some upside on that too. I think, and then Mingo, like I said, is the guy I'll be looking to run it back with from the Carolina. It might just be like a little mini secondary corollary stack with Mingo and Kamara in a bunch of my teams, I think.
Yeah, that's a good secondary stack. I think that's the way to attack this slate. Drew, when Taysom Hill potentially being out, we've had issues with Derek Carr. I mean, getting hurt in a lot of games and stuff, but Taysom Hill kind of impacts the fantasy perspective of the Saints, right? You're not having just a guy who can come in and steal 6 points from any single red zone trip. Does that make you more interested in the Saints stacks if Taysom Hill misses?
Not anymore, I don't think. I think the projections kind of baked that in already. So I think it's very nuanced in terms of if he plays or not. It's not as impactful as it kind of works out in real life in most weeks when you feel like you're getting he's sniping your TDs in the red zone. So yeah, I honestly don't have a ton of love in this game. I mean, I think Kamara and Olave is fine if you're going to stack them with Derek Carr. I just don't think this game is competitive and goes really deep. Mingo makes a lot of sense. I actually really like that call. So 3,500 for Mingo as like a run back if he's going to be relatively owned for the price, but I think makes a lot of sense over paying 6,300 for Thielen. But it's tough. Like it's either you're trusting Carr with Olave. Olave's expensive, so like at the price, those are generally stacking opportunities because you think if Olave gets there, Derek Carr at the price has to have gotten there at 5,600. So it's starting to just trim down to like 2-man stacks on New Orleans side, 1 run back on Carolina. It's really not a game I really like. It's not probably one of my favorites, and it's so easy. Carolina is one of those just boring. I just see it too many times during the season. It just you're at the half and they have 3 points, and they're the people they're playing against have two field goals. So I know it's in a dome and that can alleviate some of those pressures, but I don't know. I just don't trust Carolina to really get the ball moving, and I certainly don't trust Derek Carr to keep the ball moving. So one-off and 2-man stacks for me. New Orleans, very slim, a little bit of Carolina run back.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Like you said, Snyder too, like Mingo and Kamara make a lot of sense if you're wanting a mini stack a game in a good environment, and kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying, Drew. So I think that's the best way to approach that game. It does suck watching Derek Carr try and throw the ball. I had Chris Olave last week, and it was frustrating because Olave does get open a lot. It just takes a while for him to get the ball, actually. So yeah, I think you guys got that. We got the Rams and Ravens. If you guys ever have any questions too, put them into the chat. We can try and get to them as well. The Ravens game is a little bit gross. The Rams defense hasn't been incredible by any means, but we get a little bit of rain in this one. Could see some winds here, and it just kind of creates a little bit of a gross atmosphere around this game, Snyder. We don't have many people projecting for ownership. You got Isaiah Likely at 3,500 projecting for 10%. Kyron Williams with basically a monopoly in that backfield at 11%. Other than that, this game doesn't come in at very high ownership. The Ravens are implied 23.5 points, really, and you got the Rams around 16. It's not a terrible game with the slate context. You talked about how the Bengals and Colts is like a decent total of 44. Does the weather just do too much to you where you're like, I don't really want to go to it, or do you still have interest in this one?
I think the weather is going to play a big role in this. As we've seen in the totals dropped 5.5 points. And I can't remember if I was watching NFL Network yesterday or ESPN, but they had a weather guy on there talking about weather around the industry or around the NFL games this weekend. And the guy referred to this as a monsoon type game. 100% chance of rain. There's going to be winds right around 10 to 15 miles an hour with gusts up to 20 miles an hour. It could be an ugly game here, but the spread's holding strong with Baltimore minus 7.5. It's hit 7 a couple times, but it quickly rebounded to 7.5, and the unders definitely fell quite a bit here. So I won't be looking to target this heavily, but I do want to play a couple pieces from the Ravens side here. I do like Keaton Mitchell here at 4.9K coming off the bye week. I think they really implement him a lot more this week. He's kind of like a guy like Devin Achane, or where he can just break off these big plays like we've seen. He's had at least a 20-yard run in every single game he's played this year. He's had runs of 60. He's had some 40-yard gains. He's a guy that could definitely, if this is going to be like a rainy type game, I mean, I think they're going to run the ball a lot. The Ravens have a huge offensive line advantage over the Rams defensive line, so I expect them to just pound the rock here. And I like Mitchell at 4.9K to somehow get 70, 80 yards rushing, and maybe even, I think he'll score at least one touchdown. It has been Gus Edwards a lot around the goal line, but I think they're going to start working in Mitchell a little more off the bye week, though. So I really like him. And then Likely is a good tight end option there. At 3.5K, they aren't going to be throwing the ball downfield too far if the conditions are this bad. So I think he'll be looking to target Likely on some of those shorter routes there. So I think Likely's a guy that can pull a page out of Wiley's book, go 335-1 or something like that. But definitely like a couple pieces in this, but nothing too great, too targeting this. I think he could play the Ravens defense also at 3,300. I mean, they've been one of the best defenses in the league, and we get a shaky Rams team coming in where the Ravens have actually scored 12-plus points in 3 of their last 4 games and have hit double digits, I think, 6 or 7 times this year. So I actually could use the correlation there with Mitchell and the Ravens defense even.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yes, Likely was major chalk at times on a main slate, especially week 1. We can't forget about that. I mean, Lamar does like targeting the tight ends a little bit. So, yeah, I do like that call there. Drew, you heard what Snyder said. I mean, this total opened up 5.5 points higher than what it's at now. Do you think that the projections are overreacting, or maybe you think they're just reacting right? Like, what do you think from this perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the projections do look kind of low. I'm not sure that it's overreacting. Is the dude's name really not pronounced Keaton? Am I just going crazy?
Keaton, yeah, it could be. I'm really bad at
I think it's just.
I was thinking the same thing when you said it, Snyder. I'm like, damn,
and I'm like,
I said like Keaton. I don't know. Keaton, yeah, that sounds way better.
I think I met a guy in college. His name was Keaton, and it was spelled that way. So I know there's some weird pronunciations for names, but I'm going to call him Keaton. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with Snyder. I mean, the weather is definitely not something you can overlook. It's going to be pretty nasty. I mean, even the ownership is tough to get to. Like, you just don't expect like a really big game from even Lamar Jackson at the price. Like to make the ownership work on this slate. I mean, he would have to be like 1%, and that's stretching it. So. If you're building a couple lineups, this isn't a game I would even target. I think the defensive side, like the Ravens at 3,300, makes sense. Again, the weather just is pretty bad, and generally speaking, with that weather, there's not going to be a lot of long passes. There's not going to be a lot of long runs. It's going to be very short. Going to be punting a lot. So the defense is coming to play. That being said, I do like Likely 3,500 for a tight end. I talked about that on a couple games ago. Tight ends in these type of conditions, I just love. I think they get a lot of targets and they get over their expectation for reception. So I do like Likely at 3,500. And I think all things considered, he's probably, relatively the cheapest with a decent projection. Everyone else has a really bad projection at a elevated price, more or less. Lamar Jackson being an example. But yeah, Likely is probably my favorite here. I'm still going to try to play some Lamar Jackson stacks with Likely. Jackson can just do it. I mean, he gets down the field and runs it in a couple times. They get tired of passing it. There's an avenue for Lamar Jackson to kind of break the slate in a sense at the price and in the ownership. So But yeah, I think Snyder's right. Like, this isn't a game like I would really stress over. I think Ravens defense makes a lot of sense. I think likely at the price makes a lot of sense. If you want to play Jackson at the ownership, it's not a terrible game theory strategy. But outside of that, I won't be playing Keaton Mitchell, Kieran Williams, like the running backs. The traditional running backs are overpriced in my opinion.
Yeah, I like it. And that Keaton Mitchell one, though, I will say, off a bye week, we want to be early on these guys who are explosive. If you could say 12 to 15 touches for Keaton Mitchell, I'd sign up right away, Snyder. And coming off a bye week, that's definitely something I want to get exposure to. And I think Lamar. I mean, we talk about this Ravens offense where they're driving it down several times a game, right? And it's been Gus Edwards has been getting the touchdowns. Like, if it just flips Lamar's way just a bit, I mean, it could be crazy scores. Obviously, this might not be the game environment for it, but, it's worth noting that this Ravens offense just in general, from a fantasy perspective, looks kind of gross because Gus Edwards is the one scoring all the touchdowns, but they're moving the ball really well. And they still have a team total in almost the mid-20s. So, yeah, it's nice to see. And we got more games to get to. We have 6 games left here. Is Jackson sick? I didn't see anything. Is Lamar Jackson under the weather or anything like that?
There was a report earlier in the week, but it looks like he's fine. He returned to practice. He should be good to go for Sunday.
Perfect. So we'll go to the Buccaneers and Atlanta Falcons. This one's a little bit different because when you look at it, it's going to have 5-6 players above 10%. The Falcons have been a team that's wanting to run the ball, right? And the Bucs are a team that doesn't really allow teams to run the ball. So will we see maybe Desmond Ridder have to drop back a little bit more often? Does this bring guys like Drake London and, dare I say, 3,700 Kyle Pitts into play a little bit more? And then when you look at the Bucs side of the ball, we get Rachaad White, who did well last week, got into the box, had a big run at the end of the game to solidify his value. You get Trey Palmer at 3,200 as well, projecting for double-digit ownership. It's an interesting one, and I'm trying to look here. There's no one out, right? There's no one out for the Bucs that would make Trey Palmer pop. It's just his snap count has just trended up. Am I right, Snyder? Or am I wrong?
That's the way I'm seeing it. Yeah, he's been playing right around just about half the snaps, or maybe even a little more than half the snaps. He's caught at least 2 passes in the last 6-7 games. So I think Trey Palmer is another one of those punt options if you want to go to. Good game environment inside the dome here, close spread. I think he's fine there if you want to go for another punt guy. And then Drake London's another guy that's going to see quite a bit of ownership here. I think Drake London's fine for like cash, but I think I'm going to try and get away from him in tournaments. I don't think he really has the upside. He's only scored over 15 points once this season. So if Drake London's going to be chalk, maybe I play him in cash, but he's got a guy that I'll just be fine getting off of in tournaments and such. So at 4.6K, and if the Atlanta's favored in this game, if they get up big here, I don't think they're going to actively be having Desmond Ridder try and push the ball down the field. They're just going to let Bijan Robinson kind of take over there. And Bijan Robinson, 6.5K, he's got a good price tag on FanDuel too. I think he's right around 7K on FanDuel. He's getting more touches. He just hasn't really been able to do too much with them. Like last week against the Jets, I know that was a bad situation versus a good defense. He was under 3 yards per carry, though, in that game. There's been a couple games where he's been over 5 yards per carry. Saw 3 catches in the last 2 games, so I get it. Not sure if I'm going to get there, though, at 6.5, but I think I like some other running backs a little better. But Bijan's fine, though. I really don't have too much conviction in this game overall, though. It's kind of a cross-off game for me, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't blame you in the sense that, like, where the production for the Falcons wanted to come from is the running back spot, right? And we don't really want to trust Desmond Ridder at all. But we did have Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder full stack ended up winning $1 million earlier in the year. Is this something that could repeat itself, Drew, or are you off it?
No, I'm going to be – oh, sorry. I had to double check. I'm not on mute. Honestly, man, I just like a couple pieces from the Atlanta side. Desmond Ridder is not part of the stacks, though, at 5K, surprisingly enough. It's just one-offs. Like, I think the total is relatively moderate. They're right around 20. It's pretty close. It's, a 2-point spread, Atlanta over Tampa Bay. Both team totals are right at 20, 21 points for Atlanta, 20 points for Tampa Bay, give or take half a point. So really, it's just like one-offs. I think at the price, Kyle Pitts makes a lot of sense, and Drake London make a lot of sense as one-offs. Bijan Robinson, I think, is going to be a little bit too popular. 6,500, he's going to be 20 to 25% is what I'm looking at. Saber has him at 20%, 21%. So I think I'm going to be off Robinson. He's done well, and then he's had some blow-ups, but at 20% ownership, I feel pretty comfortable being on the opposite side of that in history. So Kyle Pitts for me. Rachaad White, I've gone back and forth between like a passing game and Rachaad White game from a red zone perspective. I think Mike Evans is still in play. He's just, I mean, you could have the argument he's a Hall of Famer at this point. He's just going nuclear his first 3 or 4 seasons. But Mike Evans and Rachaad White are probably the only pieces from Tampa Bay I'm realistically considering. But Atlanta, I think Atlanta has the best pieces for the big, Millie Maker type upside. Drake London, 4,600. Obviously, he's the go-to. And then Kyle Pitts at 3,700. There's a lot of room there for him to even score 10 points and possibly get there. And depending on the price point, like what did we see last week? The guy had 2 like 5-point performances and still won the Millie Maker. So I just think when you open up value from that perspective, that's probably the way I want to go. So Kyle Pitts has touchdown equity, has plenty of upside from receptions. And then Drake London at 4,600 definitely has, 25-point upside.
Yes, makes sense there. One thing to note, AJ Terrell, he did exit last week's game with concussion. He has cleared concussion protocol, will play for this one. Mike Evans has been matchup proof this year. It's been crazy to watch. Every time you just see NFL red zone,
he's just injury prone. But this year's been better. I will say this year's been better. But typically in the past, he's been the issue of you play him at low ownership and he goes off for a touchdown, and 80 yards in the first quarter. Then he gets hurt in the second quarter and he's out for the game. You blow up your lineup. But he's been very good. He's been very good.
Yeah, it's been great to watch as someone who has a lot of him at best ball, and this is the last best ball week for the regular season, so it should be a good time. Hopefully, he continues it. Snyder, I'm gonna have to love Drake London just because when you get a chalk running back like Bijan, and not to say that Drake London is like pure leverage, right? Because they're both going to be over 20%. Kyle Pitts might even be like a little overexposed at 11% or whatever, but this Bucs team is just shown time and time again that, hey, we'll concede through the air and stuff. We're going to force Ritter to throw the ball. We're going to put 7, 8 in the box and stuff. And London's got talent. It just comes a matter of, will Ritter throw him the ball? I love playing that game on Sundays. We played it with Pitts for years. So why not just continue that tradition on Sundays? I'll have a little bit of interest in that passing game, but only because I like pain. Let's move on to the Texans and Jets. So the Jets are part of that Northeast, kind of little bubble where there's not a great opportunity for good weather, right? We get Zach Wilson entering the quarterback room yet again, showing that he was not the problem, and nor was Tim Boyle ever the answer. And then you look on the Texas side of the ball, Tank Dell out. Sucks that they used them on an inside run play, but that shit happens. We got Noah Brown. He'll be back for the Texans here. This game doesn't ring a lot of bells, Snyder. We got 1 and 2 guys projected for double-digit ownership. That's the Jets defense and Garrett Wilson. Outside of those 2, I mean, do you have any interest much in this game? I mean, I guess Breece Hall at 6,200 could be a thing.
Yeah, I don't see myself really getting to this too much. I think this is a game that finishes 10-3 or something like that. We have some pretty poor weather here as well. 90% chance of rain, and the gusts could reach 25 to 30 here in this game too, which is not something I'm looking to target with Zach Wilson in those type of conditions. But I do think the Jets defense is a strong play here at 2,900. It's going to be lower owned than the Browns, and the Jets defense has been great this year. I mean, it's the only thing that's holding this team together basically. And I think C.J. Stroud is going to kind of come back to reality a little bit this week. I like the Jets to win this game, actually. I think that the +3.5 is definitely live with the Jets here. So it's basically just the Jets defense for me here. I don't see myself playing Garrett Wilson, especially if he's going to be rather chalky. Breece Hall, 6'2". I think I'd just rather play other pieces than him. And really isn't too much here for me. It's just kind of like a cross-off game for me. we're gonna see CJ Stroud without Tank Dell here, and I think Sauce is gonna lock up Nico Collins, gonna take him out of the game. And then Brevin Jordan's there too, I guess, at 3-1. If you want to go back to him, I played quite a bit of him last week, but don't really see myself getting to anybody in this game, though. It's kind of another cross-off game with a total of 32 in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I kept saying this earlier in the season. When are we ever going to see Garrett Wilson below, what was it, 6.2K or whatever? Well, he's 5.5K now, Drew. He is getting double-digit ownership. Are you going to test the waters with Garrett Wilson today, or are you going to be more like Snyder and just kind of be like the Jets defense, maybe the Texas defense, and move on?
That's where I'm leaning. Yeah. We got plenty of games as we go into the afternoon games here in just a second. Garrett Wilson honestly, it seems like a trap. He's going to be relatively owned. He's probably going to be a key point of the Jets offense, but what offense are we going to see? The team total's at 14 points. So I think Sabre has his target or his projected receptions at like 5 points or 5 receptions. So there's 5 points. And then it's all about the yards. So like you're at basically 10 points as a median projection. So yeah, I think Wilson's an easy fade. Yeah, I think this game in general is an easy fade. So Jets defense is fine. They're not going to be crazy owned, and obviously a low scoring game in general. So yeah, I think this is a cross-off game for me. Probably play some Jets defense and move on to the afternoon slates, which see some much better totals and game environments.
Yeah, this game will tell a lot about CJ Stroud, merely for the fact that this is the toughest passing game, matchup that he'll have. He's without one of his best weapons in the NFL. I mean, Tank Dell's been just a stud. And it'll be interesting. And he's been a great quarterback. So I'm actually very curious to see how he responds to adversity here.
And people would say that's such a good contrarian spot, like at his ownership, but he's so expensive. It just doesn't. It's really tough to make that work. And without Tank Dell, it really makes it difficult. So,
yes.
I mean, as good as they've been, this isn't really the spot you would try to leverage because there's not much. There's really not much to grab onto outside of just wishing.
Yep, and the wishing is what we'll have to do. I mean, if he comes out, balls out, and they win this game, I mean, the Rookie of the Year race is probably already over. But that to me would be like, wow, this dude just went to New York against a great defense.
It can happen. Yeah.
And it'll be a fun one to watch. Speaking of award races, we get Brock Purdy, the MVP frontrunner. We get a 30-point team total from the San Francisco 49ers. If you're wondering, are the 49ers popular? Yes, they are. Christian McCaffrey is one of the top-owned running backs, projected at 29% at 9,200. Ayuk is at 6,900. And then it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, Brock Purdy and Kittle, all above 10%. So this is an interesting one. We just saw this matchup on Thanksgiving. The 49ers, if you remember correctly, kicked their ass. Ayuk is 6,900, projecting a little bit high. Deebo Samuel seems a little bit low. I know the price disparity is only 100 this week, but it doesn't feel like Deebo is going to come in at 6% and Ayuk's going to come in at 17%. I imagine those numbers will be a lot closer together the closer we get to kickoff tomorrow. But Snyder, I mean, we finally get Brock Purdy priced up to 6,500. Thank God he's not below 6K anymore, but he's still very stackable. I mean, what are you doing with this 49ers team?
This game kind of almost scares me a little bit as the Niners just blew these people out a couple weeks ago. They come off that big win last week against the Eagles. Could be a little bit of a sleepy spot where they come out a little flat maybe. I mean, this is the nut spot, though, with McCaffrey. We saw him put up 33 against this team. And then Seattle's given up 33 or more points 3 of the last 5 games to the RB position. So this is just the absolute nut spot for McCaffrey here, 9-2. I think his ownership is going to come down a little bit, though. Like I said, with Kamara kind of seeing his projection increase and his ownership go up. So I think we should see McCaffrey kind of hold right around 25%, maybe slightly higher than that. But I think we were going to see him, 30 to 35%. But I think his ownership's going to come down a little bit closer to that 25% range. But this is a great spot for him. I
should be 40%.
Yeah. I mean, I just slightly worry about them kind of coming out a little flat here. Maybe they pick it up in the second half, but McCaffrey can still get there in his sleep. But at 9-2, he's going to have to put up 30-plus, I think, in this game. I'm definitely going to be playing him. He'll be a cash lock. I'll have him a decent amount in tournaments as well. Then we look at the wide receiver position for the Niners. Debo's been smashing the last couple games. Last week was kind of all on 2 plays, though. He took a couple slants to the house. Then we caught 4 passes last week, but he scored on 2 of those 4 passes. I think I may be going more to Ayuk this week. I think he's going to be – I think he'll be pretty much the same ownership. I think we should see Ayuk, Kittle, Debo all in that 10 to 15% ownership range. I think I may go to some Ayuk, though, here this week if I played anybody. He's still been solid. He caught 5 last week and scored a touchdown. He's now scored a touchdown in 4 straight weeks for Ayuk. So I don't think there's any way you can go wrong with this with Kittle, too. I mean, if the Niners show up, they should just absolutely smash this team once again, though.
Yeah, and there's a big news here too. Geno Smith seems to be a true game time decision. Obviously, Drew Lock is not the answer by any means. We had DK Metcalf nuke against the Cowboys. You have Lockett and Njigba there. I mean, is there any interest on the Seattle side, Drew? And I know that Geno Smith missing probably would mean no, but as things stand, I mean, he's only projected 2% ownership in a trail script. And the 49ers haven't really been great against passing, like the passing game this season.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really been on Seattle even in good game environments or at least game totals. So not much love for Seattle here. I guess Charbonnet makes sense, especially if Geno Smith is out. 5,400 for him. I mean, there's still an opportunity, I guess, if they are going to get the ball back, if San Francisco moves the ball fast and gets some scores. And they're struggling to move the ball with Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith. The Jigba is like one of the top projecting wide receivers. I think Charbonnet is probably a good Seattle spot, but honestly, I think this is a San Francisco onslaught. I think McCaffrey is going to be under-owned. 9,200 is too cheap. And honestly, in the context of the slate, like if you look at the rest of the afternoon, which we haven't talked about a lot of good running back spots, like the next highest most expensive running back is Eckler at 7,600, and he projects for 10 points less. So, like from a raw points perspective, McCaffrey makes a lot of sense on this slate. Yes, does he, optimally, does he need to score over 30? Probably, but like over 25, over 20 even on this slate could be enough, even at the price, because like there's not really a lot of expensive wide receivers that are really worth, a huge like 30-point ceiling at least. Like Tyreek Hill isn't on this slate, so. I think McCaffrey is kind of a must play, or at least a spot where you really want to find a ways to fit him in. Outside of that, I think Purdy with Ayuk make a lot of sense from a stack. They're still relatively cheap, especially for a 30-point team total. Kittle's hit or miss. I mean, Kittle has huge games and he has busts. So like I obviously wouldn't exclude him from my player pool, but he's not a guy I would prioritize. But he's just one of those, like he can harm you, obviously, if he goes off for 2 touchdowns or something. But, yeah, for me, it's McCaffrey. I would even play McCaffrey with Purdy and Ayuk. I'm not afraid of that. I think there's enough points to go around. And like I said, I think McCaffrey's like the one spot on the slate where the mistake is not playing him. I just – unless we get the ownership so wrong like we have the last couple weeks, which could happen, I think McCaffrey's going to be under-owned if he's going to be 25% owned.
Yeah, I like it. And there's no Tyreek Hill this week on this slate, right? Tyreek Hill really held down the ownership from McCaffrey last week, and this week there's no real.
Tyreek Hill is Stephon Diggs, who's 600 cheaper and 8 points less projected. So
exactly, and that's why McCaffrey is just going to grade out very, very high, and rightfully so. Let's move on to an indoor game. We go to Las Vegas. It's the Minnesota Vikings and Las Vegas Raiders. Only one player is projected for double-digit ownership. That is Josh Jacobs. Snyder, this is one where it's tough to trust Dobbs. I mean, he apparently held on to this starting position over the bye week that they had. You get Justin Jefferson back into the fold. It's not one that just, really gets you excited. Justin Jefferson's 8,500. The Raiders have been kind of taking their time on offense. They've been running the ball a ton. What do you think about this game? Do you see it differently? Do you think this one could have some juice in it that I'm not seeing?
I think Dobbs Jefferson stack is a good stack for like the million maker. I mean, we could see Dobbs kind of go back to where he was a couple weeks ago. I mean, he's never played with Justin Jefferson either. I guess at 8,500, it looks like Jefferson's going to be. I don't think anybody's really going to play him. Saber has him at under 5%, and I mean, if you can give me Justin Jefferson 8,500 under 5%, I think this is the spot where maybe he comes back against a bad Raiders pass defense, and kind of reminds people that he's debatably the best receiver in the league. So I don't hate the Dobbs Jefferson stacks there. So I'll have a little bit of that. So that's kind of something I'm looking at here. I don't see too much from the Raiders side that I really want to get too aggressive at. I know the price tag on Adams is cheap. I just can't get there. I haven't played him all year. I don't think this is the week I start playing him either. So I think it's just kind of a Dobbs Jefferson stack in some large field contests, because Dobbs is going to be lower owned than a lot of the quarterbacks on the slate. 5.9 is cheap. I mean, you get that stack for relatively low cost with a stud like Jefferson. So I think that's the way I'm going to move with this. I like the next two games quite a bit, at least one of the next games, and then some pieces on the other afternoon game we'll get into. But I do have some conviction on a Dobbs Jefferson single stack here. I think that's going to be quite unique.
Yeah, that's interesting. Under 6K, you won't have me hating on anyone for playing Josh Dobbs with this running ability. And now that you get his best weapon back, potentially we do see a new and improved, not new and improved, but a fresh Dobbs with another week in this offense. Yeah. Maybe he does outperform expectations. I do like that. Drew, I mean, Josh Jacobs here has been getting fed. He is under 7K. This Minnesota defense is so much more improved than they were last year. Like last year, we'd be bashing against them every time. This year, it's like, it's almost taken me half the season to be like, okay, the Minnesota defense is good. I have to remember that.
Every play.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. But Josh Jacobs, under 7K for the work he's getting, that's got to be intriguing, right?
It would be. I think Minnesota's going to kind of keep the pedal down and move the ball pretty quick. I just don't think Jacobs gets scripted into this one. And I think he's going to be close to 20% owned at the price. I think 6,900 on this slate, a lot of optimizers are going to jam him in for a decent median projection and a pretty cheap price point for running back. Because like I said, we haven't had a lot of good running back spots to target. I think that mid price point is right in the sweet spot, and Jacob's going to get kind of pushed up to the 20% mark. So I'm a little bit different. I think he's fine. Obviously in cash, the workload makes a lot of sense, but I think in tournaments, he's probably not the ceiling guy that I want. I think Minnesota moves the ball well. I think Minnesota plays well. I saw a comment in the chat on Minnesota defense. I do like that. I mean, when two of your receivers you're going to be targeting is Trey Tucker and Michael Mayer, who two people no one's ever heard of, you're probably going to want to play the defense on the opposite side. So I do like Minnesota. I mean, if you want to play Joshua Dobbs with any receiver, you want to play him with Hawkinson or Justin Jefferson, I think that's fine. Jefferson's probably one of the more expensive, positional players. I'm not sure I love him in this environment, I guess. 8,500 is a bit rich, right? For a 22-point total, whatever it is, Jefferson's probably up there, but Dobbs with Hawkinson makes sense. Jefferson by himself, I would probably go. I just don't think stacking with Dobbs would be the way to go. But the Vikings defense, 3,100 and Vikings defense is a little bit interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it is definitely a decent game environment in terms of where, like, hey, what if this one were to shoot out? It wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. And there is a lot of pivots in this late set of games, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams projected for over 20 points, which is interesting. You only got 8 teams on the slate. The only 2 are the Seattle and Vegas, who are not projected over 20 points. So you could have some high-scoring affairs here, and we'll get into these last 2 games in a second. Remember, Giblets 44% off your first payment, whether it's a week or whether it's a month. Be sure to get in on it. We have the Chargers and the Broncos right now. It's in LA. It's another good game environment in terms of just weather and stuff. And this week, the Broncos are not going to be extremely chalk. So last week, people learned their lesson. Albeit getting there with one of the Cortland Sutton running so pure that he gets into the end zone on a 45-yard catch and goes 2 for 77 and 1. So the people did not actually pay the price. However, you do get Keenan Allen and Javonte Williams both projected at 18% ownership. Jalen Guyton is close to double-digit ownership at 3.2K. Then you have Sutton, Wilson, and Judy kind of at a myriad between like 5 and 8. Snyder, I mean, this is a Chargers offense that has sucked. A big reason for that is their running game. It seems like this is what Staley was saying, is that maybe the more touches go to a guy like Joshua Kelly this week with Eckler struggles. This could be an interesting game just to kind of figure out what both these teams are trying to do, because the Broncos aren't the most fun team in the world. They try and slow you down. The Chargers are not able to run the ball, so they speed games up. And what's your thought on this one?
I actually like Austin Eckler quite a bit. I think he's going to be like 2% owned on this slate. He's one of my favorite plays on the whole slate, actually. I think we see him kind of bounce back huge in this spot. The Broncos have been bad versus the running backs. I mean, they've given up some big games against RBs this year. Maybe this is the spot where I think the Chargers are going to come out and just lay one on the Broncos here. So I expect the Chargers to be up early and just pound them in this game. I like the Chargers to win this by at least 2 touchdowns. I think we finally see the Chargers kind of get a good win here. The Broncos have been kind of hanging on there last week. They were in it. I think Houston let them in that game way more than they should have. Houston should have really put one on them there, and they didn't. They let Russ come back. Russ threw the interception there at the end. I don't think I'm going to play Herbert, but I will have Keenan Allen for sure in the player pool, 8,600. He's going to take a lot of ownership with him, though. I think he'll be at least 20% owned on this slate. But, I mean, the volume is just way too good to pass up. And I think if Herbert's not giving it to Eckler, it's going to be force-feeding it to Keenan Allen here. And I do expect the Chargers to score like 4 touchdowns in this game. So I think Austin Eckler is one of my favorite plays on the slate. He's great for the million maker in all formats, basically, because he's going to be under 5% for sure. I think on FanDuel, he'll be a little more higher owned, though. He's got a really nice price tag on FanDuel. He's cheaper on FanDuel, actually, as well. 7.5K over there. I'm going to be playing a lot of Austin Eckler this week. And then Keenan Allen's definitely a great option. A lot of people are going to try and jam Keenan into cash and stuff, which is a great option there if you can afford to fit him in there.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, this Broncos defense is not the best. They've been better of late, but they still concede points to running backs. And a guy like Keenan Allen, who, I mean, just look back 2 weeks ago, he dropped 2 touchdowns against the Packers. Literally dropped 2 touchdowns. He could have had a big game there and ended up not really performing up to expectations. But someone who can easily get 15 targets in any game script, really. Drew, do you have any interest in the Chargers fixing their offensive woes and maybe stacking them up, and maybe even on the other side of the ball with the Broncos?
I'm struggling to stack him up with Herbert's price. I do like Allen at 8,600 for Allen. Makes a lot of sense. I kind of compare him to Evans in a sense. I mean, the dude he's matchup proof in a way, and I got him around 15% owned. So I think Keenan Allen is probably my target on the Chargers side. The Denver side, I think Javonte Williams and Jerry Jeudy are the 2 guys that I'm going for. Cortland Sutton, I've been playing a bit of. I played him last week, and I don't think he got there, or he got there really late and just kind of he's still dudded, but maybe got like 11 points or something like that. But I think Jerry Jeudy at 4,700 makes. What do you do?
He scored a touchdown and only scored like 12 points. He had 2 catches.
So did he scored early, right? And then did nothing?
Yeah, basically his whole year has just been touchdown variance. I mean, he scored a touchdown in like 7 of the last 8 games.
I think that's what it was. Like, I think early on I was winning everything, and then he I don't think he caught anything in the second half. And I was hoping for like overtime or something, and nothing happened. So, but I do think Jerry Jeudy at 4,700. Honestly, Jeudy might be better than Sutton 1-to-1. If we want to go back to their college days, but Javonte Williams and Keenan Allen are really the 2 targets from the game overall. I think Keenan Allen with Herbert makes sense. He's just expensive. I mean, Herbert 7,500 is expensive. We talked about some 5K QBs. I think honestly, the way this slate is shaping out, like you want the cheap stacks with a cheap QB, I should say, a cheap QB stack, and then the upside from like a McCaffrey, Keenan Allen type, high upside positional player. So I don't think I'm going to have a lot of Herbert stacks, but Keenan Allen certainly in play. I don't mind the Eckler call. I think if you play Keenan Allen, you don't play Eckler or vice versa. But Javonte Williams on Denver's side, Jerry Jeudy would be one-offs as well. So I think this game, even though the totals look decent, I think it's a 43-point total. Most of it's in favor of the Chargers. I still think one-offs are probably my path.
It's wild seeing Jerry Jeudy at a 4,700 price tag. It's just coming into the season, you had all this stuff with Steve Smith calling him just another guy. he hasn't proven anyone wrong. I hope he does here soon because I got a lot of him in best ball. So hopefully Jerry Jeudy picks it up. But yeah, you guys are right. I mean, Keenan Allen last week and one of the worst weather games of the entire season still got double digits, right? And, you know, Justin Herbert's always going to look for him. You could easily see just a massive target haul toward him. And with the quarterbacks that we talked about earlier, it's like one of those things where once we get done talking about a slate or once we get closer to the end, yeah, it makes a lot of sense why a guy like Jake Browning is popping a lot because, well, you spend up for Keenan Allen McCaffrey. You don't really need an expensive stack and to get a decent team total. And Jake Browning makes a lot of sense, makes a lot of things work. And then even some other quarterbacks in that mix. I mean, it's going to be an interesting slate because I think a lot of the ownership does funnel around to guys like Baker Mayfield, Jake Browning, even Desmond Ridder could come in a little higher end than expected. Gardner Minshew in that same range. Like, I can see why the path is punting, and Keenan Allen, Christian McCaffrey, two guys that we just talked about in the last 3 games, are a big reason for that. Let's go ahead and get into the last game of the slate. It is one of the best games of the season. It is the Buffalo Bills at the Kansas City Chiefs. A Chiefs team that is implied 25 points and a Bills team that's implied 24. About 48.5 total here. This is one where who do you trust more? Do you trust the Chiefs offense, who have not been good, or do you trust the Bills defense, who have not been good? And that's where it's coming down to a slate where I don't really love a game that I don't really love. You don't really have a ton of ownership just in this game outside of 2 guys. And the big news is Isaiah Pacheco out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is projected to be major chalk at 4,200. He is projected for over 27% as things stand, and that could probably rise closer to lock. Rashee Rice is a close second at 25%, which just seems really high for Rashee Rice. No Pacheco is obviously a big deal. I see myself gravitating to these running backs, but man, Rashee Rice, that ownership, Snyder, what are you doing with him?
I've actually been on Rice from the start. He's been the guy I thought was going to transcend into the wide receiver 1 for this team. The price tag's getting a little up there. 5.4 still fine, but the price tag's definitely up there. He's definitely a guy you want to play in your cash games and such, though. I don't agree with Edwards-Helaire getting that much ownership, though. I think that guy is just terrible at football. He's had his chances countless times and just always flops. So I'm definitely not going to be on him there. I think a good game for him would almost be like 10 to 12 points, which he's done that once, I think, in the last couple of years, but I'm going to be off of him. I do like Josh Allen quite a bit in this matchup. You look at Patrick Mahomes, too. You look at both the quarterbacks here. Allen's at 8.3. Mahomes is at 7.9. Mahomes just doesn't have the resources around him to really get those big fantasy performances out there. He's scored 14, 20, 17, 16, and 8 points in his last 5 games, so definitely not the ceiling you're looking for there at 7.9, where you could play Josh Allen at 8.3. The Bills, this is their season. The season's on the line here for the Bills. It's basically win or go home about for them at this point in the season. Then you got Mahomes there, who's 7-0 off a loss his last 7 losses. So, I mean, there's a couple of trends going against each other here. I think this is going to be just a firework. So I think the Chiefs are going to find a way to score the ball here. I actually like McKinnon more than Edwards-Helaire, and I think he's going to be quite a bit lower owned. I could see him being used quite often in the passing game here. I think he'll be under 10% owned with Edwards-Helaire, like around 25. So that's the leverage I'm looking for there. I'll play some Rice there too. If I can get Kelsey, I think he's a fine option. You can jam Kelsey in there too. This Bills defense hasn't been good at all this year. I mean, they've been receiving points to teams 37, 24, 24, 29 in 4 of the last 6 games. So they're really bad defensively wise. They just gave up a big game to Hurts, even though they beat him. Or they actually lost there. They're coming off the bye. That's right. So they're coming into this off the bye. I think this is a spot where Diggs could kind of pop off here at 8.8. I don't think many people are going to go to him with all the other spins on this slate. So I like trying to find the ability to go Allen to Diggs. I think that's going to be a very unique stack. I'm looking at both of them projected to be pretty much right around 5% ownership. So I think that's a great spot to go to. I know Dalton Kincaid's a good option there. It looks like Dawson Knox is going to be active as well. I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. It just comes down to finding it. And everybody from the Buffalo side is going to be low owned. It looks like it's kind of wild looking at this game and seeing all the low ownership for like the skill position players from Buffalo, and then Kelsey's going to be under 10% too. So I think this is a great game to target. There's definitely going to be points, highest total on the game, highest total on the week, but love this game, the shootout.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, with Knox's return, right? You know, you could have a little bit more 2 tight end sets. I mean, we had Chris Ostro mentioning in it, and Big Rod talk about they turned to two tight end sets. You got to remember, this is a new offensive coordinator, so Knox's return might not be 1-for-1 like it was. This offense has clicked over the past couple weeks, past couple games. Right, they dominated against the Jets. They did well against the Eagles. They should have won. I mean, it wasn't the offense's fault that they lost that game against the Eagles. Maybe that pick that Allen threw late in the game was probably the issue, but I think they like where they're at with Kincaid as number one. I think this does take a load off Kincaid's shoulders, but I don't think Knox is going to come in and make a huge impact at all because what they've been doing has been working without him. Drew, when I see a Chiefs offense this season, it seems like every single time their games go under. I don't know. Obviously, it has a lot to do with the primetime game, Snyder, that you're always harping about on the unders and stuff. The Chiefs are always on primetime. But this total seems really high for a Chiefs game, and I just don't see it. But you might think differently. I mean, this is one of the best games to target on the slate just on paper, right?
Yeah, from a team total perspective, it's it would be the game you would go to first, right? Outside of that, it gets difficult. The key pieces are super expensive. Like stacking Allen with Diggs is nearly impossible. You would do it, but you'd be punting off 5 or 6 other positions. So it's obviously a great game environment, but you got to be selective on the pieces that you pick. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't mind fading that. I'm with Snyder there. I don't trust the guy. And honestly, for being the first week as the primary role, we'll call it, Jerick McKinnon would be the pivot you would make. I mean, Kansas City could easily just play McKinnon throughout, the second quarter on through the end of the game. If Edwards-Helaire is not holding up, or Edwards-Helaire doesn't get any volume, and it's just going to be a passing game, which Rashee Rice would be the guy that I would go to. So it's really about picking the positions. I would love to just stack up this entire game, but it's impossible without, punting off several positions. So Rashee Rice, I think Travis Kelce's in a good spot, obviously. Again, expensive. Travis Kelce's approaching 8K. I think the defenses are going to be super contrarian. I would keep an eye on that. Like, if you want to punt off a defense, we've seen that in the past, to be honest. Like, we've seen guys throw up. Honestly, it's been, I think, the Chiefs defense as a late game where the game is expected to shoot out. It's a low-scoring game. Chiefs get like a pick or two, and the Chiefs defense are the nuts at like 18 points. So there's a lot of different avenues here. I think the logical spot is to play the offensive pieces that get the volume. Stephon Diggs, Travis Kelce from each side. Rashee Rice is a cheap play. And then it's really picking your poison with the running backs. Honestly, I would probably just avoid the Kansas City running back side. I don't think you're going to lose much equity there. And, see what you can stack up with Mahomes. I think Mahomes is obviously a good play, but even stacking him with Kelce gets a little bit tough. So it's obviously a great game environment. It's just about balancing the upside with the price.
Yeah, that Chiefs defense is a good call there. I mean, Josh Allen's thrown at least one interception in the last 8 games, so we know he can definitely turn it over.
They've struggled in games too. Yeah, I mean the Chiefs have been good and bad, but Josh Allen has definitely had his ups and downs this season. Has not been the same Josh Allen from the last season.
Yeah, it has not been the same one in terms of just making mistakes. It's an interesting one. I don't love the individual plays from it, but you can obviously see it explode. Jerick McKinnon has been more on a pitch count is what I read. They kind of want to keep him fresh for the playoffs. And it seems like this is CEH's role. I do like attacking the Bills defense. It's not a great defense at all. I mean, without Milano there, without some key secondary pieces, this Bills defense is something to attack. It's just mentally prepping, stacking the Chiefs has been difficult the past few weeks, especially on Showdown. But Mahomes at under 8K is like one of those things where you're like, oh, that's different. Like, you usually see him at like 8.3, 8.4. You're getting a slight discount on him. Rashee Rice isn't that overly expensive. Like, you can get Mahomes. You can almost stack the entire Chiefs offense if you had faith in CEH for under 17K, which it's not that bad, right? Like you can get Mahomes, Rice, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire together. It's like, oh, maybe that isn't the worst idea in the world. Maybe I can buy into that. But yeah, the Bills side just really expensive, and yeah, maybe the defenses at 26 to 2,500 if you're wanting to punt. But we've had some really good defenses already on this slate with like the Browns, who are going to be one of the chalk ones to target. And yeah, I think we summed up the slate very well. I can't let you guys go without getting your play of the day, though. The second half is about to begin in the in-season tournament championship, so I'll try and get down to that one. But Snyder, we'll go first. Remember the one rule that we have, can't go above 20% in the projected SaberSim ownership. So whenever you are ready, who is your play of the slate for Week 14?
I'm going to go with Austin Eckler here at under 5% ownership. I think the Chargers are finally going to get a good mismatch here with their offensive line versus the bad defensive line of Denver. I expect the Chargers to win this game comfortably, and I think we see Austin Eckler actually get into the end zone twice this week.
Perfect. Austin Eckler. I love that one. That's definitely one of those, you dug deep in the bag for that one, a sub 5%er. You got to love it. Drew, who is your play of the Week 14 NFL slate?
I'm going to dig less down in the bag, but same game. I'm going to go Keenan Allen, 8,600. Keenan Allen, I think he's the workhorse, and obviously the script can go one of two ways, and I think Keenan Allen in the air is the way I want to play it tomorrow.
Perfect. Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler, and I'll finish this out with a little bit of a homer pick in here, but I like how we have attacked the Colts defense in the past, and hopefully Zach Taylor can get Jake Browning very much comfortable like we saw on Monday night, and Jake Browning is my play of the slate. Yes, I kind of cheat when I go quarterback because it's one of the chalkier quarterbacks, but he is under 20%, and I do think that the cheap quarterback path is the way to do it, and it allows you to fit guys like Keenan or Eckler, especially in your team if you're wanting McCaffrey as well. So again, if we don't win $1 million, if it's not Snyder, if it's not Drew, if it's not me, then I hope it's one of y'all. And good luck this week, and good luck in Week 14.